1.
Welcome to DeepSpace and Dragons, presented by Karl Corp. Karl Corp, it's not a real thing. I'm Richard, not Karl.
And I am Karl, not Richard. I'm the owner of Karl Corp, I guess, if it were a real thing.
Yep. I'm pretty sure it would make mazes and sauerkraut.
Why sauerkraut?
Because sauerkraut is delicious. But before we get into that, what's new with you?
Oh, well, I went to the doctor the other day, actually.
Are you about to tell me in the middle of stream you have cancer? Because I swear.
No.
Like, that would be amazing. I'd feel so bad, but it'd be such peak drama.
So, but I mean, like in Canada, we have universal health care, so instead of paying for it when you get the health care, you pay for it with your taxes.
I feel like there's like 3 asterisks in there, but yeah, essentially that's how it should work in theory.
So in any event, when went to the doctor, and the doctor was basically like, yeah, you have high cholesterol.
Huh.
It's not so high that you need medicine.
Crazy.
But you do need to like change your diet. And apparently I also have low vitamin D. I mean, makes sense. I live in the tundra of Saskatchewan, so...
I mean, for the record, I've told you both of these things.
Then the doctor was like, he was like going through the list of things that might be... There's like, yeah, this is good, this is good. He's like, oh, this is bad, this is really bad. And he points to a 0 on the test, and he's like, yeah, your IQ is 0. Like, oh, well,
why would they do that? That's so mean, but so good. Was this doctor me? Like, find a better doctor, man.
He seems like a pretty good doctor. He's pretty funny.
Because it's like, yeah, we had the hot dog conversation. It's finally caught up to you.
Yeah, all those hot dogs dropped my IQ to 0.
Well, not just that, but... So our problem was we did the math wrong. So we assumed the hot dogs, like, you had a set lifespan, right? Like, I would use my gods of death, Shinigami eyes, look at your lifespan, and it'd say 100 years. Then you'd eat a hot dog, and it would go to 98. But what happened we didn't account for is it doesn't reduce your lifespan, it speeds up your aging. So it's not that you're losing the terrible years at the end, it's that you now have the body of a 40-year-old man.
Oh, yeah, maybe.
And then suddenly the hot dog thread of, hey, you die sooner, that's not that scary. Hey, you age sooner? That is deeply horrifying.
That is a little horrifying. But do you have any horrors in your life?
My life's pretty good. Want to know what's new in my universe?
I am a little bit curious what's new in the universe of Richard.
So one of my friends who works at Redacted, whose name is going to be redacted for the sake of privacy, sent me an herb garden.
Oh.
So what it is it's called the, looking at the label, Click and Grow. They call it the Nespresso of plant growers. So how it works is you have 3 little capsule things that you put your plants in, and then you fill up the side with water, plug it in, and it sets it on a timer, and effectively is like a plant growing espresso machine.
Huh.
So I have like my little basil plants, which in theory should grow, and then I'll have desk basil. And it's about the size of like a shoebox on my desk. And then it just has like a little like telescoping light thing that you just kind of raise as your plants grow. And then you just pour water into it when the indicator goes low. Right? And apparently for each one that you buy, they plant a tree to offset the cost of making it. So, like I said, this was a gift from a Redacted friend who has Redacted contract with Redacted. But I'm actually like weirdly happy. Plus, because of the timer, I have it set to 8 in the morning, so if I'm sleeping and being a deadbeat, artificial sunlight flares up my room to tell me to get my life in order. So it's like, I actually had to clean my room in its entirety to set up my Click and Grow garden, and I made sure to get a plant for it that won't kill Miko. But I love this hypothetical that I have a desk garden, and if I'm feeling snacky, I could just like pluck a pepper off and eat it.
Well, like what kinds of plants would you consider growing that would kill a Miko?
I don't know. Cats and dogs have weird dietary concerns, so whenever you put any plant, Google, does this kill cat?
Fair enough.
Because, like, garlic and onions kill cat. So if I had little chives on my desk and he ate them, that's terrible for his liver. Unless you're cooking his liver, and in which case it would greatly increase the flavor.
Do you think does he eat all other plants?
My cat's real dumb.
Fair enough.
So it's not that it looked food related. He went, "Hey, food, nom. Well, I don't feel good." Eats another. And then suddenly he has high cholesterol.
Did the cat doctor warn him about his IQ?
Yeah, probably. He's pretty dumb. No, he's like fully recovered at this point from the big vet trip. But like, yeah, Little Garden makes me really happy. I mentioned to you a bit before stream that D&D Club's going well, and we're going to start recording a podcast. We have a magazine. We just opened that up for submissions. My prof's like, how? How do you have a printed in your hand magazine mock-up to show me? It's been 2 weeks. When did you? I'm like, I had a weekend where I was bored. ADHD decides what gets done. I don't. It's basically roll a d20 and see what happens. Plus, I got to invoice the college for dice today, which made me feel strong. I hear complete silence. Oh no, did my co-host disconnect?
That silence? Did I hit a button?
You're back.
I laughed, but I guess that was in the silence.
Oh, I just assumed my joke flopped, which is fair. Like, I'll go into my friends' streams and just make puns until someone boots me.
Well, I mean, speaking of jokes, I think the topic of our episode today is actually live-action comedy shows, yes?
Indeed. So I'm going to start off Arrested Development because you immediately made me think of that. So, I don't know why my brain immediately went to Joe Bluth, but when you're like, oh, I went to the doctor, IQ 0, my first thought was swallowed the key to escape from prison and gets tased in the key.
Arrested Development was definitely a very interesting show, which has a huge amount of setup and payoff.
And my prof was very clear that there's only 4 seasons of it. My prof was very clear about there only being 4 seasons for it.
Only being 4 seasons.
Yeah, Arrested Development was a great show that went exactly 4 seasons long.
Well, did he watch the remaster version of it, or did he?
Well, what remastered? It went exactly 4 seasons.
Did it go exactly 4? Now you got me confused.
Exactly, mission accomplished. But yeah, Arrested Development is probably the live action show we reference the most when we discuss manga and animes having good payoffs. Because they were willing to use 12 episodes to set up a pun. They had jokes they were setting up I don't even think they quite got to yet. Like, there's just layers on that one.
Well, one of my favorite jokes that they set up is the blind lawyer with the seeing eye dog, and then it turns out that the seeing eye dog is blind, and the seeing eye dog is called Justice.
So good.
So everyone's screaming about how Justice is blind.
Like, that's one of my favorite moments in TV. I also cannot stress enough how good it was that they ended the show the exact same way it started, with no one having made any character growth or development whatsoever. It literally is like at some point the narrator goes, and everyone's stuck in a state of arrested development. That's the name of the show! The narrator did such heavy lifting in that part of me kind of wants to add a narrator into the story you've been making. Like
a narrator? Just
straight up an extra character called the narrator who narrates it.
Well, I don't really know how you would write that in book form.
I mean, I've done it in a couple of my works where, like, in my more recent one, in my Cyber Jazz Romance, title pending, see it in bookstores in, 2026? Maybe. We'll see.
Yeah, okay.
Where it's like the narrator will occasionally just be like, you'll rereading, it's like, and as Sam went today and looked out the window, we all realized that the world was stupid. And you're like, oh, the narrator's a character because they referred to themselves while just setting the scene from third party. So it's entirely possible to have the unreliable narrator in a book. Good Omens was really strong for that. And I mean, if I'm sure anything that Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett can do, there's no reason I can't as a third-year writing student, right?
Yeah, Good Omens was another actually a good live action comedy.
Right? Well, first off, it's the best love story ever told, other than Naruto and Sasuke. But second, more importantly, that almost, I'm not going to say it was the same as Arrested Development for like setting up ridiculous payoff, but it set up some pretty impressive payoff. But I read such a funny article about it. So, for those unfamiliar with Good Omens, we got an angel, we got a devil, and go read Good Omens. Why are you... Go! Use your free trial of Prime and watch it if you can't be bothered to read it. Or Google PDF Good Omens, and I'm sure it'll show up.
It probably will. I mean, we shouldn't really support piracy, considering we're
trying to piracy.
For ourselves.
Neil Gaiman don't care. It'll probably lead you to neilgaiman.com with a PDF of it. He said, and I quote, "Bring me your tattered, destroyed copy of Good Omens, and I'll sign it, because that means you've read it a bunch." Anywho, so, back to Good Omens being amazing setup. There's a bit where they're talking that Crowley and Aziraphale are basically omnipotent. They have ridiculous amounts of power. But he drove a car to meet up to the end of the world. He can fly. He can teleport. He can dance on the head of a pin. But it never occurred to him to not drive the car, because the car is awesome. And suddenly that seemed so much better that he got stuck in the traffic he created when you realize he has wings. Because it just at no point ever occurred to that beautiful man that there was any other means of transport than his car. And it's amazing.
Well, I mean, I really actually kind of like appreciate that kind of joke. Like in the story they were writing, the one character gets a name tag and it has the wrong name on it, and he just puts it on because he doesn't want to deal with the paperwork involved in getting a new name tag. When he, at any point he could have just taken a Sharpie and written over the name on the name tag.
But it never occurred.
But it never occurred to him because you have to go through the proper channels to get your name tag changed. Well,
it's one of those things that my brother, who occasionally gets mentioned on the stream as Panda, and it's also the talking blue cat from Fairy Tale, occasionally will point out the super obvious solution to whatever ridiculous process. Like, for example, I was at the office the other day with my colleague Luigi. And we're talking about my new earbuds don't quite fit well with my ears. So I'm like, I should get ear surgery and get some plastic surgery done, then I can have elf ears. And then he points out, you have them in the wrong ears. And he's like, you thought surgery before you thought backwards. Your first thought was your ear canals are the problem, not that you have them in backwards. And that's where peak comedy can come from, is when there's an easier solution to a problem. Because when you, the viewer, know there's an easier solution, but you don't tell them that, that's like the crux of comedy, is watching people struggle when there's a simple solution.
Well, and like back to Arrested Development, the one joke, there's always money in the banana stand.
For the record, I was thinking that word for word. Like, I think I should, if I went to say it, we would have said it at the same time. It would have been terrible audio mixing, but I just need that on the record.
So it's like they think they have to actually work at the banana stand and make money, and then it just turns out there's actually just like a couple $100,000 in the walls of this banana stand,
which is just peak comedy. That's just good stuff. But that was one of the crux of the show, is they could have just not committed crimes most of the time. It's like you guys could just not be living this life. And it's just like, oh yeah, he went to jail for light treason. And it's like the actual solution to their problem was actually just confessing what had happened. Because once they did the research, found it out, the CIA just yeah, no, we did this. And that was literally solved, done. They just had to do nothing and it would have solved itself. Weirdly, How I Met Your Mother was really good for that too, where it's most of the chaos was Ted trying to force a dating life where the answer was to literally do nothing. Because the harder he tried, the more it blew up in his face. And that was kind of, I think, the point it was going for. Also, How I Met Your Mother, I'm not sure how well it aged, because there's great bits, but also disclaimer, I freely acknowledge that show had some very problematic views on relationships. Like, the existence of a playbook in general is kind of questionable, just a little.
Yeah, well, I mean...
But it had great high fives.
It had great high fives, and there's a lot of comedy that comes from it. But it did have questionable views on power dynamics and relationships and stuff, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Where Arrested Development, thankfully, everyone was garbage, so it's like, don't emulate any of these characters. Because that's the thing about comedy, is if comedy's problematic, but the show's telling you, do not be these people, then you have to kind of look at it from that critical eye of, they're not being sexist so much as saying, if you are sexist, you will be lonely and sad and die in a gutter. Okay, I can get behind that message.
Where How I Met Your Mother kind of glorifies the playboy lifestyle with Neil Patrick Harris's character.
Well, interestingly enough, so Neil Patrick Harris's character gets weird catharsis throughout the show that turns out that lifestyle made him miserable. And actually, he was much happier with just acknowledgement from his friends, getting in a relationship that has stability, having his daughter. Like, those were his actual, like, milestones. His was a lesson in what not to do. What's interesting is you watch Ted go super toxic, because the show tries to frame him as a good guy, and then he does equally toxic things, but doesn't actually get bullied and punched for it. So... your audience, some of the audience for that show didn't realize that the playbook was literally a list of what not to do. But B,
right.
The protagonist becomes worse than the side character whose entire gimmick was this.
Right.
Like, Neil Patrick Harris was just Johnny Bravo. And the point of Johnny Bravo was his schemes fail every time universally. Although Johnny Bravo was a traumatized Vietnam veteran who was just working to support his mom, so... Johnny Bravo has more layers than you realize.
Well, I mean, so Johnny Bravo, have they ever actually made a live-action version of Johnny Bravo? Or
yeah,
is
How I
that
Met
just
Your
something
Mother.
that could never happen? Okay.
Baywatch. Basically, Johnny Bravo was a collection of all of those stereotypes, which is hilarious as a concept for a kid show.
Oh yeah, but so let's move this to a slightly different form of comedy. So like Corner Gas is another pretty funny show.
Is delightful and also not something people would think. Because I'm very vocal about my hatred of Saskatchewan, but that's mostly because of my own trauma and the fact that the blood freezes in my face if I go there, like little needles of happiness. Like, people are like, how about you try getting a tattoo or acupuncture? I'm like, that's the air where I lived. The air did that.
Well, yeah, you get a nice rush of endorphins whenever you go outside for 5 minutes in the cold.
When we lived in Speedy Creek, the wind was so bad that the 10-minute walk to work could be fatal. I contemplated Ubering a 10-minute walk. For context, my current commute is a half-hour walk, followed by an hour bus ride. I considered not doing the 5-minute walk in Speedy Creek in winter.
But so I mean,
Corner Gas is interesting because it didn't have tropes. It just kind of had like, let's sitcom as realistically as possible.
Well, it was kind of also another thing that I find interesting versus these other shows that we've been talking about is that it didn't really do so much with the setup and payoff between episodes.
Correct.
Each episode was a very self-contained joke where it just kind of it goes and goes until like the cranky old man was like, "Get the F off my lawn," and it's this giant F that's on their lawn. And I really appreciate the amount of setup and work that goes into a live action comedy like that.
Well, like, to go into the opposite direction. So, like, sitcoms are definitely more self-contained Simpsons episodes. Because Simpsons is objectively a sitcom. It's the most formulaic sitcom known to man.
Mm-hmm.
So Corner Gas was more the king of the hill logic of lower stakes. And I was actually talking this the other day, like, we love to talk about how the fate of the world or the fate of the multiverse aren't good stakes. because you can't actually picture those stakes. Where legitimately ordering in a crate of steaks is higher stakes. So Corner Gas had no stakes at all, really. The only stakes of it were, how miserable is my day? But we go to something like Brooklyn Nine-Nine, where they had reasonable stakes of people go to jail forever or, like, could be shot occasionally. It was higher stakes, but it was definitely more episode of the week, but they allowed running jokes between the episodes.
Oh, yeah, speaking of people getting shot, when Boyle gets shot in the butt cheek.
And the joke is like, if it was like 1 inch to the left and 4 inches taller, I would never walk again. And it was mostly so for the rest of the show he could say, ow, my buttholes. That was the point of that scene, was to milk it for like 10 seasons. Like Brooklyn Nine-Nine did a lot I liked, and there's like longer subplot arcs and like a few multi-part specials, this, that, the other thing. I'm going to say Brooklyn Nine-Nine did not have the same level of payoff for the most part, because it ran A plots and B plots, and most of the time those plots didn't really cross over. There was just A plot and A B plot. Where Arrested Development, every single line was to lead up to a single bad pun.
Yeah, Arrested Development has just so many layers upon layers upon layers of setup and jokes, and it's just so...
Also, it's kind of an interesting note, is the number of characters. So in Arrested Development, there's exactly 7 characters.
Okay.
Everything else is an NPC or caricature. There's the core Bluth family. That is the actual characters of this show.
Right.
Brooklyn Nine-Nine probably had like twice the size of the cast and would alternate who went on what adventures and when. So, interestingly enough, Arrested Development, it was easier for them to have every character meet up for nonsense because all the characters they didn't have as many pieces to move around.
Right.
Because you'll notice, like, the character arcs that lasted multi-episode were always the actual Bluths. Like Buster going off to war being a thing that happens over a season. But each individual character maybe gets 2 episodes and might get a throwback later. Like our blind lawyer shows up 3 times over the series, I think.
The not blind lawyer. so funny.
I mean, the Mr. F plot arc lasts a while. And that was just so they can make the jokes in next season that whole situation was retarded. Disclaimer for using retarded, that is a direct quote from the show.
And the setup and payoff, though. Arrested Development, a lot of people didn't like it because if you don't watch every episode, then some of the jokes don't actually land.
Which, to be fair, especially when it was coming out, it was during that tradition, back when TV shows were designed that you could miss an episode.
Well, I mean, modern television has definitely become extremely complex and convoluted,
almost
to the point
to
where
its
it's like you miss an episode.
Like, this is going to be a weird statement, but I watch a lot of anime. I know that's a weird statement. Shocking. Everyone sit down. It's fine. But, like, a lot of things, and I complain about My Hero Academia a lot for this in its manga, are like, we need to do big, complex 30 characters, each with their own arcs, integrated, great ninja war chaos. Like, I was watching the Witcher prequel show they put on Netflix, and it felt like 5 episodes happened in their first episode. They like introduce 12 characters, have 4 nations, have a war in the middle of it, have a blood purge, have a demon, a witch, a giant, have a love story, have a loot assassin. I'm like, guys, it's okay. And then I was like watching Inuyasha in the background today because low-key, that's one of my favorite D&D settings. And I'm like, they took 3 episodes for her to fall in a well, meet Inuyasha, fight a centipede, learn what the jewel is, bird eats it, shatters it. So it's like about episode 3 where they actually get to the core premise of the show. And I'm fine with that. I'm fine with it being like the next 4 episodes are us fighting one murder spider. I actually prefer that to, in one episode, fighting 6 murder spiders.
Well, yeah, it's like the pacing of modern television is so bizarre because it's all so interconnected
Well, it's like they
And
want
then,
every
like I said,
episode to be a movie and the season to be the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And I'm like, my bandwidth is done. My ADHD can't do some of these shows. Like, Black Mirror or Altered Carbon would be like, boom, watch it. But even Altered Carbon, I'm like, if these episodes were half the length, I would still binge the season, but I wouldn't have to keep my brain on as intently to track all these names and characters. Because they're like, oh, here's a flashback with a laser rifle. And I'm like, why is this not its own episode? Why is this just a thing that happens during another episode? This feels like a lot. Like, your episode already had a gunfight scene, and now we're having a zero-gravity boxing match?
But then you flip it the other way, and it's to contrast live action with animated comedy, specifically, like, say something like Family Guy, where it's just like it's so mindless, and it's completely like you can miss half the episode and you'll still come in and the joke will still land.
Well, asterisk, it will land for a Family Guy joke. We joked on our very first episode of this podcast that I could complain for a full 40 minutes on Family Guy. That's true. That hasn't changed. Because Family Guy doesn't make jokes. It makes references. References do not equal jokes. So, let's take Arrested Development. Arrested Development's humor is completely self-sustained within Arrested Development. If you live in a Mongolian prison cell, and it is translated to the right language for you, the show contains enough context for it to still be funny.
Right.
Walt Disney saying something racist in a cryo chamber in a flashback, that's the thing that happened in Family Guy, does not land if you don't know about Walt Disney. Because the show doesn't bother to set up Walt Disney. So, Corner Gas gives you literally every piece of context you need for every one of his jokes, because they show you the town, the city, the lifestyle. And, like, let's take a Star Wars joke in Corner Gas. There's a bit where they're debating who's cooler, Darth Vader or Darth Maul.
Right.
In Family Guy, they would just give you a flashback to that. Or in Robot Chicken, they would just show you that. In Corner Gas, they start with, this is a laser sword, because my parents were too cheap to buy me a lightsaber. Well, of course Darth Vader is cooler. He's in a robot suit with a cool voice, voiced by Darth Vader's... Thank you. And it's like, but Darth Maul is a double-bladed lightsaber. Well, anyone would be cool with that. And the thing about that Corner Gas sketch is if you've never seen Star Wars, their argument gives you enough information. They're like, okay, there's Space Wars, and then there's Star Wars, the real one, that has two cool people. One's a robot with a murder sword, and the other's with a two-sided murder sword. And they're arguing nerd things while the rest of the cast are going, you're a bunch of nerds. That still works. Because there's context. So that's actually a joke, not a reference, when they go, oh, my mom never bought me the real merchandise, so now we suffer.
Well, so I was just wondering, actually, I was going to ask you, because Corner Gas, the live show, got finished, I guess. I don't know if it got canceled or what exactly happened.
Reached a satisfying-ish conclusion.
Oh, yeah, okay.
I mean, for a show that's like soft and fluffy anyway.
But then they revived it for the Corner Gas animated, and I've never watched it because when you're doing an animated show versus a live action show, the amount of effort required to set up your payoff is just so much. The bar is just so much lower for animation because you can literally just like do anything. Like going back to the Family Guy reference, they constantly have like cutaway jokes and flashbacks and asides where it's just like people appear out of nowhere and say something stupid or unexpected. And I've never actually watched the Corner Gas animated because I'm kind of worried that it'll lose some of that charm in being animated versus being live action.
I agree completely. Because as much as we could easily do a podcast episode on literally just those kinds of North American animated comedies, and we touched a few of them when we did Final Space, for example, I strongly agree that if you're doing an animated comedy, that is your greatest strength, is you can do anything. So, for example, Star Trek Lower Decks, one of my favorite shows, doesn't actually make jokes, it makes references. I'm just going to say it. Like, most of its jokes don't actually work. I'd say like 70-30. Like, if you only have ever watched that as your only Star Trek, you get about 1 in 4 jokes don't hit right.
Yeah, okay.
But because it's animated, you can literally have someone shoot someone with a puppet ray. And that's how you do it well. If you're animated, bring out your self-aware cookies with spears that when you think about bad thoughts, they go, I'm gonna kill you and chase you with spears. Have Gary use his robot arm to zip line down to a planet and scream, why is it hooked to the nerve endings? So when you use animation to tell a more mundane story, and you're not preparing to lean into the animation, it's almost a waste. Like, my one exception, weirdly, is King of the Hill, where they, like, mostly use it to be believable, and they largely used animation to give ridiculous facial expressions. But I don't actually know if King of the Hill would have been better or worse not animated. It was a weird animated choice, to be honest.
Yeah, I feel like almost all of the jokes in King of the Hill, because King of the Hill did actually make jokes.
Yeah.
But I feel like all the jokes in King of the Hill actually probably would have landed just the same, animated or not.
Where Futurama, which had amazing writing, gold standard, it had, like, 1 in 10 of his jokes were like, hey, we are... I'm going to say 1 in 10 of his jokes were just a straight-up reference. Here's famous person is ahead. Here's a reference to what someone happens in the future. Hey, this is straight-up Nixon. But once in a while, they'd use an entire episode to set up a joke. They were super self-contained, but it'd be like, okay, literally you had Amy use the claw machine to then use it to steal the entire... to rescue Bender, who then gets a magnet on his head to send folk songs. But Futurama used full value of its absurdity in animation. You could not live-action Futurama. It'd be terrible.
It most definitely would be terrible.
Where their newer animated show, Disenchantment, Will is actually using the more long-form, each episode somewhat self-contained, but the different content matters. And I'm hooked on that show because they've actually been giving legitimate plot arcs to characters. But to look back to our initial topic here. So we talked Better Off... No, we haven't talked Better Off Ted because you haven't watched it yet. We've definitely...
Well, I have watched it. I haven't watched it recently. Schitt's Creek, I did watch the first season. Thought it was pretty funny.
Schitt's Creek was an interesting one because, like, it's really critically acclaimed. And there's bits of it I really enjoyed. Because the classic, rich person loses their money, this, that, other thing, has to learn the real life. But what's ironic is, for the first season, I had more empathy for the rich people than the townspeople, because the townspeople were actually crueler. Like, you would expect the rich people to be jerks. And they had a bit of stuffiness where it's like, yeah, I'm staying here. And the one guy's like, yeah, I'm gonna shit in your toilet to prove a point. I'm like, guy, you're the petty one here. How are you the petty one?
Okay, actually, I have a question about that. Like, so I've only watched the first season, but the mayor of Schitt's Creek, throughout the first season, and like even at the end where the deal falls through, it almost seems like maybe he's deliberately sabotaging the sale.
I think so.
I don't know. I don't know if that's a fan theory or if that's like a fact or if it's something that gets confirmed to be false. I was just wondering if you have any.
So I don't
anything about that.
Like, that's interesting. So where I'm at is like I didn't really think too deeply into that, but what really struck me though was when you're trying to do the rich person drop down to everyone else's level comedy, it was super weird to me that the mayor just seemed to be a worse person.
The mayor does just seem to be a genuinely awful person, and then he's always saying that he's just trying to help, but then he's always just like...
Because, like, I get the idea that he's, like, trolling the rich guy, like, but at some point it's like, man, you're trolling the rich guy, but the rich guy's weirdly more earnest than you. It was a weird thing where I'm like, the rest of his family, for just, like, the main core cast, were like, okay, you're trying to get by, David's being a drama queen, his sister's being this, that, the other thing, the mom's being magnificently acted, which is why it's a critically acclaimed show, I'm sure. But they weren't acting with malice, where the townspeople around them seemed to be more malicious than they were. And I thought that was odd, to be honest, where I'm like, I'm actually rooting for the rich people here, because, like, I want them to learn lessons, this, that, the other thing. But, like, this mayor is just being a bully. It's like,
just straight up.
Because he's like, you guys are, he's like, he was doing the, like, I'm entitled because I'm broke. Cool. But you're the mayor. It's not like you're just a guy working in a ranch. Like, you have a certain level of entitlement yourself there, champ.
Hmm.
And
well, okay, so speaking of terrible characters, to shift gears a little bit again, do you like The Office?
I just never got into it. I do, however...
I mean, like...
so
the Schitt's Creek feeds into my preconception that people who have been rich for a long time, and particularly children that are like born into wealth, are kind of disconnected from reality, and
which
and they
seems
do
to be pretty
strange
factual.
things. But then The Office, and at least the first season of Parks and Rec, which is a show that you do recommend.
From the second season on, that's important.
The main characters are so delusional, but they don't. I don't understand how, like, they break my suspension of disbelief because of how delusional they are. Like, maybe there are people that are like that, but it's like they just have such ridiculous delusions about how important they are, and then when they go to try and do things, and then they just fail because it's their character flaw that they're going to fail.
Well,
like
that's to give
Steve Carell's character and the main lady from Parks and Rec were just like so inept that I couldn't handle it.
See, that's where season 2 of Parks and Rec gets interesting. So they tone down the protagonist, but they also up her success rate. So she starts actually like getting the park built. She starts actually like achieving things, gets on the city council, this, that, the other thing. And it's like, okay, they're being hyper aggressive, but people are actually... it's weird that a lot of the characters seem to respect her more in season 2. Like, there's a bit where Ron Swanson, libertarian boss, is like, the thing about Leslie is Leslie does a lot of work, so I don't have to.
Right.
And, like, so, like, season 2, Ron's just pretty much like, Leslie, you know I hate the government doesn't exist, but I like you, you're thoughtful and kind, and do this, that, the other thing. So it's like, she stops getting, like, brick-walled by the cast, and instead the cast actually, like, starts having her back because she is a nice person. And I'm like, this feels better to watch. Because it's like, okay, if they don't just, like... it's like, oh, if we actually see them succeed a bit, it balanced it out nicely.
Because, yeah, like, The Office and the first season of Parks and Rec, these big bosses are inept and nobody respects them, and they don't really get anything done. And it's like, I didn't find it that funny, that overbearing dynamic. Some of the smaller skits, like the idea where in The Office where they moved the guy's stapler over an inch every day. It's just like, that is a pretty funny prank, but it's just in the background of this.
Well, the thing is that's funny though is like,
unlikable character.
I don't hate Steve Carell, and I really enjoyed Space Force. So Space Force is a live action show they put up where Steve Carell's playing a 5-star general, and it's when Trump declared there'd be a Space Force, and he was in charge of like setting up the new branch of the military, the Space Force.
Right.
And he was trying so hard to work with his scientist buddy who had exact opposite views to make the Space Force happen. So the first episode he's inept because he's like, we need to launch the shuttle. We can't. And then it just blew up. But then when they do launch something and China just snips the solar panels and blows it up, they start like working together. And it was the idea like he's trying to get things done, but he's actually trying to like understand his scientist team. So you watch his character growth of military guy has to learn how to deal with nerds and hilarity ensues. But his heart was in the right place in this show. Because he's like trying to actually make it work for everybody. So I enjoyed him in that role, because at the very least he had some nice grounding to him. Because a lot of it is, watching someone who's trying to make the world a better place and fail isn't funny if he doesn't learn something from it. Like, the thing that makes failure funny is the lesson involved. Because if you're just being mean to people for no reason, you have Rick and Morty.
Yeah, so like Steve Carell's character in The Office has zero character growth throughout the entire show. He's just always an inept, terrible person. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what turned me off of The Office. And then the British version of The Office is just the same, but somehow even worse. Yeah. Maybe because I don't like Ricky Gervais? I don't know.
Yeah, but we go to Brooklyn Nine-Nine, for example, and they start Jake Peralta off as a goofball, and literally the show ends with him becoming a stay-at-home dad, spoilers to Brooklyn Nine-Nine. And they literally reference the first episode being like when he first came through, you were told the one thing mystery you can't solve is how to grow up. And here you are actually choosing to be an adult so your kid has a better childhood than you. And I'm like, that's it. That's a character arc. Boom. Nailed it. Wasn't overcomplicated. Simple, straight to the point. Jake Peralta effectively, over the 10 seasons of this show, learned to be an adult. Mission accomplished. That's a character arc. Boom.
Oh man, Brooklyn Nine-Nine is so great for its especially for its flawless continuity.
Right. So
like,
good.
they make the painting of the
Holt.
Well, yeah, of Holt, and then like, oh, I see he's smiling in the painting. It's like that's not really smiling, but then like 10 episodes later, he still has it above his mantle.
Actually, my favorite joke in Brooklyn Nine-Nine is about season 6 or 7. Holt makes a comment that he has to tell when he's lying. And the tell when he's lying is he uses contractions. If you go back through the show, that's true consistently through the entire show.
That's funny.
So it's like they wrote this in the character Bible and just waited to make you rewatch the entire show. It's kind of like the number of times in Arrested Development that they reference that Buster's arm's going to disappear. And you watch it through a second time, and they love to make like hand jokes, and Buster gotta hand it to Buster, and then his arm gets chopped off by a loose seal, specifically. Lucille costs him his hand. It's like so good. So profoundly good.
Arrested Development does have fairly excellent writing. It's just too bad that I feel like it could have done better in a modern setting, because there's not much live action comedy being made anymore.
Well, to follow up that one though, I think Arrested Development was just good, and the best thing it can do is be done.
I mean, that's true.
It's like study it, learn your lessons from it, but let it die. Because, man, they're going to bring back Futurama, and there's no way that works. Every time you cast Resurrection, a piece of the soul does not come back, and that's how you end up with Sauron. Just let it die, man.
But, one show, which I probably watched, which I don't think you did, but it was on Amazon Prime, and it was called Jean-Claude Van Johnson.
I did not, but please continue. You have my full attention.
Well, the premise of the show is that Jean-Claude Van Damme, and he's in the show, but Jean-Claude Van Damme is actually a spy who uses movies as a cover to go on missions around the world. Mm-hmm. And he's a retired spy, but then at the start of the show, to try and get the love of his life back, he decides to reactivate himself as an agent and go on these missions and whatnot. And then, obviously, hilarity ensues because he's surprisingly not really a washed-up actor, but he's older, and then he's trying to get back into the spy business. And so it was just really funny, and it also made a lot of references to Jean-Claude Van Damme movies,
which is kind of fair in this context.
It's definitely fair in this context, but then. There's been a shift towards these hyper-serious TV dramas like Lord of the Rings or Westworld or...
Yup. Yellowstone. Oof. Hey, want to watch white supremacists be monsters for an hour? No, I don't. I do not like this recommendation, Mom.
Hey, Yellowstone was apparently the most watched show on television in season 5.
And the most watched news story of all time was 9/11. Just because everyone watches something does not make it good.
in any event,
I think I just cost us like half of our followers with that statement.
But so Amazon Prime, they took down a lot of their comedy shows to make space for these super serious dramas.
Like they had one recently called The Peripheral, which had a great concept, but I couldn't do the hour-long episodes.
And it's just kind of a tragic to me that these comedy shows have been basically wiped out in favor of these more hyper serious shows.
But I mean, that does give us a sweet spot as writers.
Well, I was just gonna say, I feel like a comedy at the level of Arrested Development, or Brooklyn Nine-Nine, those types of shows, I feel like they would actually probably be extremely popular.
Oh, what's bad right
in
now
the current
too
market
is
because it's oversaturated.
They're also so saturated on resurrecting things, like that 90s show just came out, which is literally a direct sequel to that 70s show.
I mean, my girlfriend said that 90s show wasn't terrible, but I watched a YouTube review on it, and he said that the acting and writing kind of reminded him of a Disney Channel show, and I can kind of see it just like in the way.
To be fair, Gargoyles and Kim Possible were both on Disney Channel. I'm just saying, Disney Channel can have a good show once in a while. But yeah, like I'm doing my drama class right now in the power of dialogue. And the thing is, sitcoms are interesting, especially with modern tech, that the ones we seem to like the most are like the standalone complex, the Ghost in the Shell style of you have separate episodes that keep momentum building between them. And that's hard to do, because it's like we expect someone to watch these self-contained episodes in sequence. But people are like, we want it to be binge super stream shows. I'm like, no. But with that, I think it's time we move to our random question of the week.
All right.
We got a fun one. If you could have any piece of technology from a science fiction movie, what movie and what piece of technology?
Ooh.
Right? I have one that I want that I think I'm not allowed because it's too broken. And then I might have to be talked down to a second one. Because I want Glitch from Reboot. You know, the Guardian Key tool that can literally do whatever I ask it to do. But that technically only works in a computer, so I'm going to think about an actual, like, something that works outside of cyberspace. But what would you
Well,
want?
I mean, you could go for the screwdriver from Doctor Who.
First off, it's a sonic screwdriver. And second off, it's not that good if it's not in the hands of the Doctor specifically. Like, giving him that screwdriver is like giving Eisen a scalpel. Actually, I'm trying to think of something like a good comparison. It's like when Fear King Bradley had a rapier. It wasn't the rapier that made him dangerous. It was that he ran up through an exploding train and then murdered a tank. Also, we really need to do a Full Metal Alchemist episode at some point.
I agree. But
what
kind of tech would I want?
Because what's very high up in near first place is the comm badges in Star Trek Discovery that are personal teleporters and force fields and universal translators. That's pretty good. It's a pretty good one. I'm pretty sure that just makes me a god in the 2022s. Like, I think they've done that episode where someone traveled back from the 30th century and their big thing was, I have a portable hologram emitter. I'm like, that literally just made you the most powerful person on the planet.
But what? Oh, 3D food printers.
Ooh, that is a good one.
I would love to have a 3D food printer. Yeah,
I've decided that I want that comm badge, but I also want the Goa'uld hand device from Stargate that literally heals. It's literally the device that makes them play off being an Egyptian god, and for all intents and purposes makes it true. Blocks bullets, teleports you, can heal the sick and dying, can brainwash people, pull out memories. It's basically the sonic screwdriver of evil. But my final answer is I think I actually want also from Stargate. It's called the Asgard Core, and you just put your hand on it, and it just builds you what you want.
Oh, yours is like a better food printer.
Yeah, you had a good idea, and I stole it. But thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Please click the link below the video to check out The Waltz of Blades, The Minuet of Sorcery, and our weekly releases of The Professor at the Esper Academy. A short story I'm showing up unedited and unfiltered on Wattpad because I can.
I mean, yeah, that does sound like a good time. I mean, it's definitely a very interesting story about an apathetic professor who is forced to do work when he doesn't really want to.
Mm-hmm. And of course, my 2 novels are up as well, and every time you buy a book means you're kind of ironically, unintentionally funding a D&D club because I keep buying stuff for it. So it can't hurt to give me money.
If you happen to be in Ontario, anywhere near the Greater Toronto area, maybe you could join his D&D club. Who knows?
But with that, thank you for tuning in. Watch out for land sharks, and justice is blind.
Bye.
Bye.